are a lot more subtle than the journeys of the body. That's perhaps one of the great advantages of Plato over Homer. In addition, Socrates is also clearly the new Achilles. He's the new hero of virtue, and Plato is the new author of the new improved Iliad, the hero of knowledge, who is brave, but he knows what to be brave about. He doesn't have the wrath of Achilles. He doesn't have those evil qualities of soul. And like Odysseus, Socrates' hero is a superior man, but Odysseus is known for telling lies, for his ability to make up a plausible story and get what he wants. Socrates is known for telling the truth. He's the new improved version of the Achilles and the Odysseus myth. Plato, in these dialogues, has written the new Odyssey and the new Iliad. And what's nice about this is that instead of Odysseus moving around the Mediterranean and visiting all these monsters, Socrates will stay in Athens and the monsters will come to him. That's what it means to meet Gorgias, to meet Protagoras, to meet Hippias, to meet any of these deformed souls. They are monstrous creatures. They are not fully human.
Yeah. Okay. Let's do Plato. Let's talk about Plato. I know I gave you guys a tremendous amount of information, a tremendous amount of detail on Tuesday, but I hope it was kind of helpful in trying to orient how we read this thing, right? And how you begin reading and begin to realize that every moment in this text is arguing, right? There's every moment. I mean, to be honest, some of the speeches you can kind of maybe, move through a little faster here and there. But fundamentally, this is an incredibly dense text, right? And one thing I'm trying to teach you is to be thorough, to read carefully, and to begin to see that be able to read every move, to realize that every component of the text is some kind of symptom, some kind of sign, some kind of mark, some kind of point of inflection, that every moment in the book is argumentative, right? And that it's building a very specific argument. So, when we last left our hero, Socrates had asked Phaedrus to read the speech of Lysias. Right? This is, again, a strange moment typographically, right? It's one thing we got out of McLuhan, to read the marks of the text, to read the textuality, the texture of the text. Right? And then all of a sudden we get this very strange sort of offset text. Like it's a different grammar from the rest of the dialogue. Who's speaking here? Who speaks here? Right? There's a grammar of who's speaking most of the time, right? You get that Phaedrus period and Soccer period. Right? And we assume those guys are speaking. I think that's pretty safe to assume. But at this point, it gets a little bit strange. Right? Most explicitly, we have the presence of another character. We have Lysias, which is one of the strangest components of writing. Right? Writing undoes our individuality. That's what we've said all along. Right? That writing undoes not just the individuality of the speaker, right? Because it is this texture of all these other words, these quotes that aren't ours, right? That's what Barth says. We are a tissue of quotations, right? So not only does writing undo our individuality as people, it undoes the individuality of the text. So here's a text, presumably, that's mapping the dialogue between Phaedrus and Socrates, but all of a sudden here's Lysias. It's the strangest thing about the written text. And here we are, right, reading this written text that's Plato and Socrates and Phaedrus and now Lysias. The weird thing about text, and it will happen throughout here, is that about the written word, is it has a kind of spectral quality to it. Right? It functions a little bit like a seance. You conjure the dead. You conjure the not present. Now, right, when you pick up any text, when you pick up Plato, you've conjured Plato. Now you have Plato. Plato's with you right now. He's talking to you. Doesn't that seem weird? Right? When we're reading all your little papers at home, you're with us. Right? It's a little strange. We can do kind of what we want. Right? And different laws kind of apply to what we can do to your papers, what we can do to you, but it is part of you. It's right. It's constitutive of you. So all of a sudden, here's a conjuring, and this figure of conjuring is going to repeat, and it's this conjuring in a sense, this presence and not presence of the written word. Right? Lysias is both present and not present. Does that make sense? When we're reading his speech, he's both there, we're hearing him speak, but at the same time he's not there. And it's this presence, not presence in a way that, that Socrates is going to speak to and be a bit ambivalent about. Right? At some point he's going to argue, he's going to constantly say, I want you to be self-present. The speaking man is self-present to himself. And writing, you're absent. Right? And he's going to poo-poo writing sort of for the absence it creates. Does that make some sense? Right? The absence of the father is the figure he'll use. Right? The written text doesn't have a father. Does that make some sense? Right? That it's sort of orphaned. Right? And so then, hence a kind of absence. But Socrates himself will constantly do this conjuring. He will be a great conjurer. The person who will argue consistently for self-presence will constantly be the conjurer of absences. Right? So here we go, the speech of Lysias. And again, I don't know who's speaking here. To me, this is a beautifully ambivalent moment, which is performed throughout this text of who's speaking. Who's speaking? Who's speaking? All right. So it's Lysias. And he says, I claim I should not fail to obtain what I ask merely because I'm not a lover of yours. And what's interesting here, and I usually just skip over this speech because it's so bad, and one thing that's so conspicuous about it is how bad it is. Right? Look at the first word of all the different paragraphs. Right? There's again, moreover, again, moreover, again. He's not really arguing. He's just listing a bunch of shit. Right? I mean, if you had in a paper like this, you wouldn't get a very good grade. Right? But one thing I noted this time that I had not noted previously is that one sentence. I claim that I should not fail to obtain what I ask merely because I'm not a lover of yours. It's this beautiful performative moment, right? Where his argument is about the non-lover and the relationship between the lover and the non-lover, and about who should give in to whom. And he has pitched and framed rhetoric itself, an argument of persuasion, in terms of seduction, in terms of love and lust and flirtation. Right? It's this beautiful performative moment. He's like, yeah, you don't just gotta, I don't ask merely that you buy this, because we're lovers or not, right? Which is precisely his topic. Right? So he's framed, again, the seduction of the audience in terms of the seduction of a lover. Does that make sense? Right? And this whole dialogue will kind of do that repeatedly. That's right. Also, all the discussions of seduction, of love, and lust will be a kind of mirroring of the discussions of rhetoric and philosophy, of writing and speech that happen in the second half of the dialogue. Okay? So I assume when you're reading this speech, you're like, yeah. It's sort of a crappy speech. Right? And we actually have to read it twice. Right? It gets repeated. But what is the basic argument? Because the argument is strange in that it won't change. Everybody uses the same argument. What is the basic argument? Why should one submit to a non-lover and not a lover? What's the argument here? What's Lysias' argument? Why? What's the argument? Lysias argues that you should submit to the non-lover. Right? Why? Thank you. Right. It's rational, right? There's something irrational about love. Right? There's something mad. Right? And the role of madness will become important. And Socrates will make a very nice move where he'll distinguish kinds of madness. And he'll say, sure, his move later will be, I buy your argument, but I'm going to make a different kind of distinction about it. And what we'll learn about argument, right? We'll get three versions of this argument. Right? There are three speeches about this. And they all make that same premise. They all agree to that. So what is it that makes one speech different than another? Simply the emphasis. Certain parts get played up, certain parts get played down. Socrates says, sure, you're mad, but madness is good. Right? It's all. You will never see evidence. You'll never see proof. What you'll get in these arguments is this kind of morphing of emphasis, this distribution of an argument. Does that make some sense? Right, we'll get to there. We'll get there, right? Because this text is an argument and about rhetoric. While this text, poo-poos rhetoric, is in fact an exemplary rhetorical text. All right, so the dialogue ends. The speech ends. And Lysias says, well, Socrates, how does the speech seem to you? Isn't it marvelously eloquent, especially in its use of language? Right? And that's precisely what's at stake in this dialogue. Right? Eloquence. Eloquence versus truth. If you speak well, what does it mean to speak well? Right? Are you speaking of the world, or are you just speaking beautifully? Right? And so the speech ends, and sure enough, Phaedrus says, isn't it eloquent in its use of language? But what is the use of language? That's precisely the topic of this dialogue, precisely the topic of this text. And Socrates is hilarious. Wonderfully, my friend, to the point of quite overcoming me. This was due to you, Phaedrus. I was watching you and observed how you were enjoying the speech as you read it. And because I know that you understand such things better than I followed your guidance and entered into your ecstasy, my holy companion. Again, is he serious or not serious? What is it that's happened here? How has Socrates read the scene? What's really at stake here? Right? You get in this argument, Socrates is like, nah, he's into Phaedrus. He's watching Phaedrus, and he's like, Phaedrus, I'm watching you, and frankly, I got a little, you piqued my interest, if you know what I mean. I was aroused. I entered into your ecstasy. Right? So there's clearly this kind of erotic, performative component to texts that Socrates is kind of game for. Right? But at the same time, is he serious? Is he not? Right? My holy companion. And what does Phaedrus say? So you want to make fun of it, and this is the fun. This is the key Socratic moment right here. This is Socrates in a nutshell. Do you really think I'm joking? Don't I seem serious? That is the ultimate, most explicit enunciation, utterance of irony. Don't I seem serious? It's precisely the relationship between what seems and what is. That is irony. Right? Socrates will never be one or the other. He's never either joking as if joking were opposed to the serious. He's never serious as if it were opposed to the joking. He's always both. He's joking, he's serious. That's the ironic position. Right? I told you that irony is this fundamentally religious posture. Irony fundamentally points to the inadequacy of language, the inadequacy of the body, the inadequacy of this mortal coil to hold the infinitude of life, to hold the truth, to hold the divine within its tender frame. Right? And so when I'm ironic, I'm necessarily being serious. What I'm saying is, this mortal life, I can't take it that seriously. I can't really submit to it once and for all. Why? Because there's a whole nother life. There's an infinite life. There's the life of truth that you can't see. So the only way I can express that life seriously is to take this life not seriously. So play for Socrates, irony becomes the only way to actually live seriously. And we'll see that in his argument as we go along. Do you really think I'm joking? Don't I seem serious? And again, this will come back to us at the end of the dialogue, I think, and sort of explicitly. Socrates is going to say, let's be humble for a moment. Let's be serious for a moment at the end of the text. Let's be serious here and say that nothing written is taken seriously. There's going to be a hilarious moment where he seems like he's going to stop all the joking, right, and end with this kind of this sort of reverent attitude and this prayer. But I see the same irony, right? It's taking a slightly different tone, but I find the exact same irony, almost more explicitly at the end, with this holy reverence right at the end. And then Phaedrus can't deal with it at all. Don't joke, Socrates. Tell me truly. Tell me truly. Tell me truly. That's what's at stake. Can I tell you something truly? Can I tell you something truly? Can truth be told? Right? That's what's at stake for Socrates. Can I ever tell you anything truly? Is perhaps the only way I can tell you something truly to not tell you truly, but to be ironic, to joke. That's why Phaedrus and Socrates, I think Socrates understands Phaedrus. I don't think Phaedrus ever gets Socrates. Right? Right there. He's like, he demands one or the other. Right? Phaedrus, I will tell you now, learns nothing in this dialogue. Phaedrus is not the student in this pedagogy. He is not the student in this text. The student of this text is you, the reader. Phaedrus is a bad student. He doesn't learn anything. He's persuaded by Socrates. If you map the narrative arc of this, Lysias comes in as a rhetorician in favor of Lysias, and he ends being seduced by Socrates. Right? There's a direct conversion of Lysias, right? From rhetoric to philosophy, from lust to love. Right? And it begins, you can see it, and it seems like perhaps that is the trajectory that's mapped for us as readers. That we're supposed to identify with Phaedrus and be converted, right? From the ways of lust, the ways of the body, the ways of rhetoric, the ways of sophistry, to the holy ways of religion and truth and philosophy. But I want to suggest that look at Phaedrus. He's a freaking moron, right? He's a moron. Yeah. Exactly. That what we learn to read, we are taught to read in a way performatively. We're taught to recognize irony. We're taught to read and understand irony, right? That at that last moment in the text where it says, "Don't take anything written seriously," and you're reading it. At that moment, the two different kinds of readers are separated from each other, right? The reader who takes it at its word, right, and who identifies with Phaedrus, right, and it's basically the classical philosopher who just takes things literally. And then there's the person who's learned, actually through the text, never to take anything seriously and to understand the performative component, the how within the what. So when you get to that moment where you're reading something that says never take anything written seriously, it's such a hilarious performative contradiction. Right? How can you read something that says don't take this seriously? Well, then I can't take you seriously, then I shouldn't take this seriously. Right? The reader who gets that moment is the reader who's learned. Right? And Phaedrus never gets it. Right? Phaedrus is this kind of is almost a negative model of how to learn. He's not the ideal student. You are the student. This whole text is a performative pedagogy that teaches you how to live ironically, at least how to recognize irony, if not in fact to live it. Because irony fundamentally is a life. So back to our dialogue. And so poor Phaedrus, right? He's a bozo. He's always univocal. Right? He can never be dialogic. He never occupies those two positions the way Socrates does. And he's always, are you serious or are you not serious? And the answer is, both. Right? Phaedrus can't handle that ambivalence, can't handle that dual charge, can't handle irony. Right? He needs one or the other. He says, please, don't joke, Socrates. Tell me truly, as friend to friend, do you believe that any other Greek could have spoken more impressively, more copiously on the same subject? And then Socrates brings out an argument with which we are all familiar. How's that? Are we to praise it on the grounds of the author's relevance? So here's Socrates pulling a weird move, right? Because again, throughout this text, he will be ambivalent about the authority over your own words. In some way, he'll sort of poo-poo writing, he'll disdain the written word, because it does kill the author. Right? But here he is wanting to kill the author. He's saying, what? I should judge the speech based on the author's relevance? And he distinctly is here participating in our celebration of the death of the author. Does that make some sense? Right? He says, right? Are you and I to praise the speech on the grounds of the author's relevance, or rather only on this score? The language was clear and precise, turned out in accurately balanced periods. But if we are to praise it for saying what it ought, I can do so only for your sake. My insignificance failed to grasp it. I listened to it merely as a piece of rhetoric. Right? And there you get the classical dismissal of rhetoric. Merely rhetoric. And that's that conception of rhetoric that we still hear today, right? That when a politician speaks, we say, oh, it's just this rhetoric. Right? We assume that's bullshit. It's not really serious. It's not what counts. So Socrates is like, okay, I'll treat it as merely rhetoric, not for what it ought to say.
If you would like to hear something more, please ask. Socrates, What do you think of this speech? Isn't it marvelous? Especially the way he uses language?
My friend, it is divinely inspired, and I am overwhelmed by it largely because of you. As I observed you reading it, it was clear that you are enthralled by this speech. You know much more about such things than I do, so I followed you as you led the divine procession and worshipped Bacchus in ecstasy.
Well, it seems you want to joke about it.
Do you really think I'm joking and refusing to be serious?
Socrates, in the presence of Zeus, the god of friendship, please tell me honestly whether you think any other Greek could speak better or more fully on this same subject.
What are you saying? Should we praise this speech because the writer says what ought to be said, not merely because each phrase is clear, well-formed, precise, and polished? If that is what you want, I might grant it as a favor to you, but it escaped me, no doubt because of my inattention. I was only paying attention to the rhetoric, and I was thinking that Lysias himself would consider that aspect to be insufficient. Perhaps you disagree, Phaedrus, but he seems to have said the same thing 2 or 3 times, as if he had little to say about the subject. Or possibly he did not much care about it. He sounded to me like a young person who delights in showing off by saying the same thing over and over in different ways, each time with equal brilliance.
On the contrary, Socrates, that's the best part of the speech. He has said everything that could be said on the topic. Nobody else could ever treat it more fully or better.
Now I have to part company with you. If I were to agree, wise men and women from ancient times who have spoken and written on this topic would refute me.
Who are they? Where have you heard anything better than this speech?
I can't tell you at the moment, but I probably heard it from the magnificent Sappho, or from the wise Anacreon, or perhaps one of the prose writers. What leads me to say that? Right now I have a feeling in my breast that inspires me to make a speech that is different from that of Lysias, but not inferior to it. Of course, I am well aware of my own ignorance, and I know that I could never generate such thoughts myself. Therefore, they must come from some other source that flows through my ears and fills me as if I were a jug. But because I am so obtuse, I have forgotten where and from whom I heard it.
Well, that's wonderful, Socrates. You could not have said anything better. Forget about where you heard it, even if I asked you. Just do as you promised and make a speech even better than the one written here, one that is just as long but different in content. If you do that, I promise, like the 9 archons, to donate a full-scale golden statue to Delphi, not only of me, but also of you.
You are already made of gold, my friend. But please do not think I meant that the speech by Lysias is entirely wrong, and that I can create a speech that differs from his on every point. I don't think even the poorest writer could fail totally. For example, I could not treat the topic of this speech without also praising the self-control of the person who is not in love, and censuring the lack of self-control on the part of the person who is under love's spell. These are obvious points that must be made and accepted. But in that case, it is not the ingenuity of the ideas, but their arrangement that should be praised. On the other hand, when genuine discovery takes place, then we should applaud the ingenuity rather than the arrangement.
I think that what you say is reasonable. So, I will concede the following. You may assume that someone who is in love is less sane than one who is not in love. If you can speak on the remaining points better and more fully than Lysias, and not simply repeat what he has already said, then your statue of hammered gold will stand next to the Cypselids at Olympia.
Are you going to take my little joke about your beloved Lysias seriously? Do you believe I attacked his speech because I really think I could outdo him and compose a speech that is more sophisticated than his?
My friend, you have provided a hold so that I can get even with you. You're required, as I was, to speak as well as you can. Otherwise, we will have to exchange barbs the way vulgar comedians do. If you're not careful, you'll force me to parody what you said earlier. Oh, Socrates, if I don't know Socrates, I don't even know myself. Or, he wanted to speak, but he pretended to be shy. Accept the fact that we will not leave this place until you reveal what was in your breast that inspires you to make a speech superior to that of Lysias. We are alone here, and I am younger and stronger than you, so speak freely rather than having me force you.
My dear Phaedrus, I would make a fool of myself as an amateur trying to speak extemporaneously on the same subject as an expert writer.
Socrates, stop pretending to be shy. I know a way to make you speak.
Please don't tell me.
I will say it anyway. And it will be in the form of an oath. I swear in the name of... which god should I name? How about this plane tree? I swear by this plane tree that if you do not deliver your speech in its presence, I will never recite or show you another speech, not even one word.
You demon. How cleverly you have discovered how to make a lover of discourse follow your orders.
Then why do you try to evade me with such tactics?
I will stop. Now that you have taken this oath, I cannot risk losing your feasts of words.
Then speak.
Do you know what I'm going to do?
Do about what?
I'm going to cover my head so I can run through my speech as quickly as possible without having to look at you and lose my way out of embarrassment.
Do whatever you like, as long as you give the speech.
Come, you melodious muses. I know not whether you are so called because of the clear tones of your song or because you are descended from the people of Liguria. Lead the way as I try to tell the story my good friend forces me to tell, so that his companion, whom he has always considered wise, may appear to be even wiser. Once there was a boy, actually a young man, who was especially handsome, with whom many were in love. One of them, being unusually shrewd, pretended that he was not in love with the young man, even though he was no less in love than the others. One day, he tried to persuade him concerning this very point, claiming that it is better to gratify someone who is not in love with you than someone who is. This is what he said. Young man, the only proper way to begin thinking about any topic is to know exactly what you are aiming at. Otherwise, you will always fail to hit the target. Most people are unaware that they do not know the nature of what they are talking about. So they proceed thinking that they do know, with the obvious result that they agree neither with other people nor with themselves. You and I should avoid this flaw that we denounce in other people. Seeing that the question you and I are about to consider is whether it is better to love someone who is in love with you or someone who is not, we should agree about what love is and what power it has. Keeping this in mind and referring to it, we should then determine whether love benefits or harms us. Everybody knows that love is a form of desire, and it is obvious that even someone who is not in love desires what is beautiful. Then how can we distinguish between someone who is in love and someone who is not? Bear in mind that two basic principles lead and guide everyone. One is the natural desire for pleasure, and the other is an acquired judgment that seeks what is best. Sometimes these two are in harmony, but at other times they conflict. Sometimes one dominates, and sometimes the other rules. When judgment, guided by reason, takes charge and aims at what is best, that is called self-control. When irrational desire dominates and drags us toward pleasure, it is called hubris. Hubris has many names because it has many parts and many forms. The form that happens to dominate provides a name that is neither praiseworthy nor beautiful. For instance, If the desire for food overpowers other desires and dominates a person's judgment about what is best, that is called gluttony, and the person is called a glutton. Or, if the desire for strong drink takes over and dominates, we know what to call that person. It is no less clear what we should call a person who is controlled by any passion that is related to these. Based on what I have said, my meaning should be obvious. However, everything is clearest when stated explicitly. So, I will say that irrational desire, which overpowers reasoned judgment and seeks what is right and just, leads to our delight in beauty. This irrational desire is intensified by a kindred passion for carnal beauty, and this is the same victorious potency that gives rise to our calling it the power of love. Phaedrus, does it seem to you, as it does to me, that I am inspired by some god?
Socrates, you have definitely been seized by an uncommon fluency.
Then please continue to listen in silence, because this truly seems to be a sacred place. You should not be surprised if at times I am caught up in the frenzy of the nymphs. My speech is already becoming dithyrambic.
That's true.
You are responsible for that. But listen to the rest, because what is about to overcome me might still be avoided, although that is up to the gods. Right now I must resume my speech to the young man. Well, my excellent companion, we have identified the subject of our deliberation, so we will keep this in mind as we try to determine what benefit or harm will come when you gratify someone who is in love with you rather than someone who is not. Whoever is ruled by desire and is a slave to pleasure will do what is necessary to render the beloved as pleasing as possible. For those who are out of their mind from love, everything is welcome that does not resist them. But anything that is stronger than they are, or even equal to them, is considered to be hostile. Therefore, a lover will not tolerate someone who is better or even equal, but always seeks to make that person weaker and inferior. Ignorant people are weaker than those who are wise. Cowards are inferior to those who are brave. The inarticulate are weaker than skilled speakers, and people who are slow-witted are inferior to those who are quick. Defects such as these will delight the lover regardless of whether they come about by nature or by nurture. If they are lacking, they must be acquired, or the lover will lose the pleasures of the moment. Of course, the lover will be jealous and will do everything possible to prevent any social contact that promises to make the one who is loved into a better person, thus inflicting great harm. Especially forbidden is any activity that will promote wisdom and cultivate divine philosophy that would surely lead the beloved to forget the lover. Thus, the lover will promote ignorance and dependency on the part of the beloved in order to achieve maximum pleasure, but that causes the greatest harm to the beloved. Concerning the mind, a person who is in love is the least beneficial guardian or companion. What about the body? What sort of habits and nurture will those who are controlled by pleasure rather than goodness conceive and impose when placed in a position of authority? Obviously, they will prefer someone who is weak rather than strong, reared not in bright sunlight but in the shade, and unaccustomed to strenuous exercise. Pampered by a tender way of life, with a body adorned by makeup and decorations rather than a natural complexion, the lover will promote everything that creates such a lifestyle. All of this is well known, so there is no point in developing it in more detail. I will simply summarize it and move on. This kind of body during war or any other time of great danger provides confidence to the enemy and frightens friends, including the lover. Next, I will consider the benefit or harm that the relationship with the lover will provide concerning the matter of property and possessions. It is clear to everyone, especially to the lover, that it would be desirable to deprive the one who is loved of all valuable and sacred possessions. including father, mother, relatives, and friends, assuming that they would hinder and censure this pleasurable relationship. Furthermore, those who have money or property of their own will not be easy to catch and, once caught, hard to manage. So the lover will necessarily begrudge the acquisition of any kind of property and rejoice when it is lost. Therefore, lovers will be eager to keep the one they love unmarried, childless, and homeless for as long as possible so they may continue to enjoy that sweet fruit. There are many other bad things in life, but the gods have usually mixed them with momentary pleasures. For example, a flatterer is a poisonous snake that can cause great harm, but nature mixes flattery with the sweet charm of some muse. Prostitutes deserve to be called noxious, along with many other such creatures, but they are quite pleasant for the moment. The lover, in addition to doing harm, is the least pleasant person with whom to spend the day. People of the same age favor each other, so the old saying goes, because enjoying similar pleasures promotes friendship. Even they can get too much of each other's company, but things become much worse when the two are dissimilar in age and the lover exercises strong coercion over the beloved. That kind of domination is oppressive to everyone. The older one, who is driven by mad desire, refuses to leave the younger one day and night and is driven and spurred to the pleasures derived from seeing, hearing, touching, and all the other senses in the presence of the beloved. What solace or pleasure can the lover give to the one who is loved that will counteract the extreme disgust from such intimate contact with a person whose looks are fading with time? It is hard to hear about such deterioration, and even harder to witness it, as you would be required to do every day. You would be constantly kept under surveillance and guarded from everyone. At the same time, you would be forced to hear excessive and inappropriate praise. Frequent accusations are hard to endure when a lover is sober, but are even more disgusting when they come from one who is drunk and whose speech is unrestrained and insulting. While they are still in love, such lovers are hurtful and repugnant, but after their love fades, they cannot be trusted at all. Forget the promises and vows formerly made and all the assurances given to keep you in that painful relationship with the hope of future benefits. Now that it is time to pay, things have changed. A new ruler governs the lover. Sense and self-control have deposed love and madness, and the lover has been reborn. But this is invisible to the beloved, who, as if talking to the same person, demands compensation for former favors and reminds the lover of what was said and done and of agreements they made. The lover is ashamed to reveal the transformation and yet cannot fulfill the previous vows and promises made while insane. Having regained sanity and self-control, the lover does not dare to act as before for fear of reverting to that former state of being. So, the lover abandons the earlier promises and defaults on former agreements. The shell has been flipped again and landed with the dark side up, so the lover changes course and runs in the opposite direction. The beloved is forced to chase and curse the former lover, unaware that it was wrong from the beginning to accept a lover who was deranged rather than someone who was not a lover and still sane. The alternative is to surrender to someone who is devious, irritable, jealous, disagreeable, harmful to your property and possessions, damaging to your body, and, worst of all, detrimental to the nurture of your soul. Truly the most valuable and divine concern for human beings. My young friend, you should keep all this in mind and know that the friendship of the lover comes not from goodwill, but from an appetite that demands to be satisfied the way hunger requires food. Just as a wolf is fond of a lamb, so the lover adores the beloved. There it is, Phaedrus. You will hear no more, because my speech ends here.
But Socrates, I thought you were only in the middle of it, and that you would have as much to say about the person who is not in love as about the lover, explaining why it is good to favor such a person. Why did you stop there?
My dear friend, don't you realize that I am no longer speaking in dithyrambs, but in heroic verse, even though I am criticizing the lover? What will happen if I begin to praise the one who is not in love? No doubt I will be completely possessed by these nymphs to whom you delivered me. So I will simply say that the person who is not in love has all the good qualities that oppose the bad qualities of the lover. There is no reason to make a long speech, because I have already said enough about both of them. My speech will have to stand on its own, and I will cross the river and depart before you force me to do even more.
Not yet, Socrates. Wait till it cools down. Right now it's high noon and the sun is straight overhead. So let's wait a while and discuss the speeches until it's time to go.
Phaedrus, you are truly amazing when it comes to speeches. I do believe that of the speeches that have been produced while you have been alive, nobody is responsible for more of them than you, with the possible exception of Simmias from Thebes, either because you have composed them or compelled someone else to do so. You exceed the rest by far. Now I think you have caused yet another one.
Well, that is definitely not bad news, but what exactly do you mean?
My good friend, just as I was about to cross this river, I received a sign that often appears to restrain me from doing something that is wrong. I imagined a voice coming from this exact spot telling me not to leave until I have purified myself for an offense against some god. I am a bit of a prophet, not a really good one, but like a poor writer, my skill is sufficient for my purposes. Now my offense is clear, and I understand it. The mind is a kind of prophet, because as I was giving my speech, something was bothering me. In the words of Ibycus, by honoring the human, I have dishonored the divine. Now, as I said, I understand my transgression.
What kind of dishonor do you mean?
Phaedrus, I mean that the speech you brought with you was terrible, and the one you forced me to give was also terrible.
How so?
It was simple-minded and profane. What could be more terrible than that?
Nothing could be more terrible if what you say is true.
Well, do you think that Eros is the son of Aphrodite and is therefore a god?
Yes, that is what people say.
Not Lysias, nor does your speech that was delivered through my mouth because of the spell you cast on me. If Eros is a god, and he surely is, then he cannot be bad. But both of these speeches presented him as something bad. In this way they sinned against love, and their foolishness was clear. In an effort to build their reputation, they might deceive a few simple-minded people without saying anything that is truthful and sound. Therefore, my friend, I must purify myself. According to an ancient myth that was unknown to Homer, but familiar to Stesichorus, there is a way to cleanse oneself after such an offense to the gods. When Stesichorus' sight was taken away for slandering Helen, unlike Homer, he understood the reason for his blindness. Being a follower of the Muses, he immediately composed the following lines. Untrue is that account. You never embarked on a well-built ship and came to the citadel of Troy. As soon as he completed this recantation, which is called a palinode, he regained his sight. I will be wiser than they were, at least in this respect. Before being punished for slandering Eros, I will offer my recantation. But this time I will leave my head bare, not covered from shame.
Socrates, nothing you could say would please me more.
Phaedrus, my good friend, now you understand how terrible those two speeches are. mine as well as the one you read from the manuscript you had up your sleeve. Imagine that a person with a gentle and honest character who was in love with, or had been in love with, someone of a similar nature happened to hear us say that lovers initiate major quarrels for petty reasons and become jealous and vicious toward the one they love. Wouldn't that person conclude that we had grown up among rough sailors who had never observed love among free and honest people? Wouldn't that listener vehemently refuse to accept that indictment of love?
You are probably right about that, Socrates.
Then because I am ashamed when I imagine this honest and gentle person, and out of respect for Eros, I am eager to wash out the bitterness of what I have just heard with a fresh account. Also, I recommend that Lysias immediately write another speech urging that one should gratify a lover rather than someone who is not a lover.
Well, you can be sure that once you have praised the lover, I will tell Lysias that he needs to compose another speech on the same subject.
I am sure you will, as long as you continue to be who you are.
Then speak with confidence.
Where is that young man I talked to before? He must hear what I have to say before he prematurely favors someone who does not love him.
He's quite close to you. You can call him whenever you wish.
Handsome young man. Please understand that the previous speech was by Phaedrus, son of Pythocles from Myrnus. The one that I will now present is by Stesichorus, son of Euphemus from Hymera.